So today what I thought I would do is I would do an update to the garden. I think it's been a month since I showed you the polytunnel, and since then we've done a lot. All the tomatoes are in the ground, the potatoes are also in the ground. We're trying two different methods. We're trying a method where you grow them in buckets, and then we're trying a method where you grow them straight into the ground. Mainly just out of interest, and also if the bucket method works, that's fantastic because it just means that we can grow so many if we want very easily, and we have good control over the soil because the soil in our garden is horrific. If you've seen the polytunnel video, the topsoil is about this tall and it's basically just dust, and then underneath that all you get is gravel. It's really bad quality soil, but this whole area used to be a mine. So it's not going to be the best quality soil. So the bucket method works really well for us. We've got a really good composting system as well, so we're not going to run out of compost anytime soon either. There's still a lot of things that we want to do on the garden, like have raised beds, but I don't think that's going to happen this year. I think this year, now that the polytunnel is up, the next focus is to get things like a pergola put up outside our back door so we can start collecting all the water. At the moment we're having a glorious heat wave and I'm loving it. It's killing my husband because he's a Viking and he likes cold. So for me this weather is just okay. It's semi-warm, and for him it's basically the Sahara. So he's not loving it, but I'm loving it. And one of the things that we wanted to get done was to be able to harvest rainwater. The gutter along the back of our house is broken, so it doesn't really collect any rainwater. So we need to get that fixed, get a pergola up, and then get a line of water butts up. So yeah, the next big thing for the garden is really just to start harvesting water. We've got a good system out front, but we need to get something better out back where the majority of our plants and our fruits are. I do have a very, very good herb garden, but it's at the front of the house. And that's one of my rules. I don't show the front of the house in the same way that I don't show the faces of my son and my husband or share people's real names, because it's the internet and we all know what that means. So I won't be showing you the herb garden as much as it's my pride and joy, but just trust me, it's beautiful. It has a lot of herbs, and I haven't had to buy the majority of the herbs that I use now in over a year. I will do a separate video on some of the herbs and the plants that I grow indoors. I've got some chili peppers that I need to harvest soon, and I'll show you how I grow those, how I dehydrate them and preserve them so that I can use them in cooking for all year. But today I'll just show you the garden. So this is the edge of the polytunnel. At the moment there's some weed-proof membrane around the polytunnel. You can't see it, but this whole area, well, you can see it over there. There was loads and loads of bindweed coming up, and it was covering up this whole area, and the last thing we want is bindweed ending up inside the polytunnel. So we've put weed-proof membrane, and then that's going to get covered in wood chips. There's going to be a whole load of borage growing on the other side. I'll show you that in a second. But on this side we've got some sunflowers, and the variety is evening sun, so they're not that normal yellow sunflower that most people think of. It's actually a tiny bit of orange at the very base, and then the rest of it's a bright red, and it's beautiful. So that's the variety that's growing up here. We had to use rubble from the garden just to stop my son from running over it with his trolley, because he kept running really, really close and it was making us nervous. So we thought, right, we need to block it off, and we thought we would just use rubble that was in the garden. So that's what we've got all along there. Let's see, there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 of those. And then over here we just have the compost area. This is for the kind of last stage of compost, middle stage of compost, and that is the first stage of compost. We've put some old pond liner because there used to be a pond in this garden, but we ripped it out. One, because we don't want a pond, and also because ponds and small children scare me. So we saved the pond liner, we put it on top just to heat it up, stop the flies from going too nuts, and it just makes the whole composting system a little bit faster. Over here we've got some comfrey growing, so where those stakes are, that's where the comfrey is going to come up. Apart from having a whole load of medicinal uses, it's very, very good for compost, and if you ever get hens and chickens it's very useful as well, which we are planning to do, but just not this year. And then behind the compost bin, you can't see it, but I have actually planted nettles, so I'm hoping that this whole area is going to be full of nettles, and then I can start having nettle tea regularly. Back here behind the polytunnel, I can't remember if this is borage or comfrey, one of the two. I think it's comfrey, but it could be borage, one of the two. And then over here are the raised beds that the house originally came with. This is just kind of our open air, what was originally the open air composting system. All the things from the bone broth go in there as well, because when I eventually make my raised beds, I want to be able to put all the old bones from the bone broth in there just to make the soil really, really good. It's using the hugelkultur method. In the long run, these aren't going to be here. We're going to have a row of berry bushes going up along here. This is just the distraction method for the pigeons, because when these were very, very small, the pigeons were going for those and they were trying to pick them out. So we just started having an open air composting system, and this was just enough to distract them, and they hadn't gone for any of our seedlings since. So while it doesn't look the greatest, it does the job, and this is a temporary setup anyway, so it's good enough. And then these are our potatoes. These are the ones that we planted in the ground. We have some here that you can see coming up, and then some there as well. I'm trying to remember what these are. I'm pretty sure that these are calendula, and I think those were good companion plants. This is kind of the area that my husband normally keeps an eye on. So those are the potatoes that we've got growing in here. This unfortunately is just kind of a dumping ground for all the roots and bushes that we had to dig up. Over there you can see all the topsoil that we had to dig up for the polytunnel. We couldn't really stick that in the compost bin, there just wasn't enough space. And then over there, that was there when we moved in, and we need to move it and deal with it. But it was about 3 times the size when we originally moved in, so we've tackled a lot. But as usual, the garden is a never-ending project. And then over here we have some more potatoes. I know that there was another potato that was meant to come up here, but it looks like that one didn't make it. But the rest have, and we have more than enough potatoes in the other raised beds and in the buckets, which I'll show you now. So these are the potatoes. You're going to have to ignore the towels which are around the children's frame. This originally was a little play frame for my son, but then as he got older we had to put it around things like my work desk or any plants that we didn't want him to get to. So now we use it as a kind of potato traz just to protect them from my son. So that's what it's being used for. We just have 4 buckets. I think there's 2 potatoes in each, and they're growing really nicely. It's going to be very interesting to see how these compare to the ones that are in the raised beds, but it's going to be fun to find out. And now I'll show you the polytunnel. Right, so this is the polytunnel. I'll just close the door. As much as I love this polytunnel, I am not a fan of the door. So let's just do a quick look at everything. So tomatoes, marigolds, and then 2 squash at the end. And then things like the seedlings and the many sunflowers that we still need to plant somewhere in the garden. I know that some of these are going to get planted in the front of the garden, so that should be about 5, but then we need to figure out who we can give these to, because we have too many. We weren't expecting them to germinate as well as they did. I think out of all the seeds that we planted, only 1 didn't germinate, which is this one over here. Oh no, sorry. Oh no, actually I'm talking rubbish. These are the ones that went out front. So yeah, so let me see, this is the sunflower seeds. I think this is the basil. Yep, that's the basil. And those are eventually going to get planted around the tomatoes. It's a very good companion plant for them. And then once I get all the tomatoes and we get a good crop, I'm going to be canning them, and then all the basil that we grow with the tomatoes is going to go into the tomato soup. Sorry, not soup, what's the word I'm looking for? Sauce. I'll be making a load of tomato sauce with this. Obviously we'll eat some, but there are a lot of tomatoes. We can't eat all of that, as much as we might want to try, so I am going to have to can an awful lot of that, and I'm okay with that because homemade canned food is just, oh, it's so good. Actually down here, I think this is the borage. I can't remember, I'll have to ask my husband. So these are the squash, and they're growing really well. I mean, these only went in a week ago and they're absolutely exploding. The polytunnel is just incredible. Things grow in here so fast. And these are all the buckets that they're in. We don't have the potatoes in here because potatoes and tomatoes are susceptible to the same diseases. So the last thing we want is them taking each other out. So tomatoes go in here and potatoes go outside where they grow just fine. So that is the garden update. I'm going to try and do another one a little bit later on. I think maybe August would be a good time, August, September. I can't remember when the tomatoes are meant to come in season, but I will find out and I'll do a little update when everything's in bloom and then show you how much we get. I'll be very interested to show how much we get from the raised beds as opposed to the buckets, and that's going to be a fascinating video. And then any problems that we ran into. So far everything's going well, but this is our first year properly gardening and not just reading about it, so we'll see. If you like my content and want to follow me on Patreon, that's where you can find my early content, extra content, and see the thought process behind things like my books, cover designs, videos and artwork. You can also find me on Instagram, but the best place to follow me and make sure that all my new content is sent directly to you is through my website and the mailing list. On the top right hand corner you put your name, the email you want your new content to be sent to, and that's it, you're done.